What does France have to do with one of the most popular pub games in England? And what's it have to do with ginger ale? And most importantly, who is Chalky Trowbridge? We'll cover all of that and more this time on The Gaming Bench. To play the English pub game Shut the Box, you really only need a pair of six-sided dice, a piece of paper, and a pen. Traditionally, the game uses the numbers 1 through 9 or 1 through 12. During play, you'll compare your dice rolls to the numbers on the board and cross them off or cover them when they've been rolled. However, I think the game is much more satisfying if you play with a purpose-made Shut the Box set, like this one. Instead of crossing off numbers on paper, you'll flip down the paddles. Historically, it was more common for sets to have sliding shutters that covered the numbers, making the name Shut the Box make a little more sense. Any number of people can play, and it can also be played as a solitaire game. Regardless of the number of players, there seems to be two popular ways to play Shut the Box. In the first version, all numbers are showing at the start of the game. First player rolls 2 dice. So that's a 6 and a 3. So I could either close the 6 and the 3, or add them together and close the 9, which is what I'll do. A player continues in this manner until they roll a combination of numbers that are already closed. This ends the player's turn, and their score is the sum of the remaining open numbers. So that's a 6 and a 1. So I could either close the 7 or the 6 and the 1. I'll close the 7. 3 and a 2. I'll close the 5. So that's a total of 9. The 9's already closed, so I can only close the 4 or the 5. 5's already closed, so I can't close that, but I can close the 4. And since I can't use the whole dice roll, that's the end of my turn. For a total of 20, which isn't a great score. The dice are passed to the next player, who takes their turn rolling and closing numbers until they close them all or become stuck. Then they tally up their score and pass the dice to the next player. When all players have taken their turn, the lowest of the scores wins. Ties can be settled with another round between the tying players. Now, this isn't the best way to play, in my opinion. The second version of the rules, the superior rules, starts the same way. Again, first player rolls the dice. That's a 6 and a 1. So I could add them together and close the 7, or the 6 and the 1, but I could also close the 5 and the 2, the 4 and the 3, and so on. Any combination that adds up to the total. So I'll close the 7. Continuing, I'll close the 3, close the 5, 9, 9 again, so I'll close the 8 and the 1, 4. Once all the numbers above the 6 are closed, I can go down to 1 die. 2 and 4. So my total score is 6. Pretty good number. This gives you a lot more flexibility than the first version and adds a slight element of strategy to the game, especially if you understand the probability distribution of the sum of 2 six-sided dice. A player continues until they shut all the numbers or become stuck. Like the first version, lowest score wins. In both versions of the rules, players have the option to only throw 1 die instead of 2 once all the numbers above 6 have been closed. It's worth noting that historical references to the game usually indicate that it's played in rounds and scores tallied until one player reaches 45 points, at which time they're out of the game. The winner is the last man standing. There are many variations of the rules, some of which I think are just dumb. For example, Against All Odds starts with only the odd numbers open. Even Stevens is the same game, but with the even numbers open. Lucky 7 starts with all numbers other than the 7 shut. First player to roll 7 wins. I don't think any of these really make the game any more fun. But here's 3 other variations that I actually think are worth playing. Jackpot plays just like the regular rules, but you only shut one number on every rule, either an individual die or the combination of dice. So for jackpot, I rolled a 5 and a 4, so I can pick if I want to shut the 5, the 4, or the 9, but I only can pick one of them. Tournament is again the typical game, but players tally up their scores between rounds. The game ends when one player reaches 100, with the lowest score winning. Digital is the typical game, but a player's final score is read left to right across the remaining open numbers. Alright, if I'm playing digital, now I'm stuck and my final score is 79. This one is interesting because it changes the strategy. You need to reduce the final number showing, which means closing the highest numbers first may not be the best approach. The history of Shut the Box isn't well documented. In fact, nearly all references I could find seem to circle back to the same book, Pub Games of England by Timothy Finn, published in 1975. This book is an update to the Watney Book of Pub Games, also written by Finn, published in 1966. However, the section on Shut the Box didn't have any new information in the update. One reference places the origin of Shut the Box as far back as 12th century Normandy. However, there are more references that indicate the game dates to the Napoleonic period in France, early 1800s. There seems to be some consensus that the game originated in northern France and traveled with sailors and fishermen to other parts of the world. At that time, the game was also called Trick Track, not to be confused with a contemporaneous game, also called Trick Track, different spellings, which was very similar but not identical to backgammon. The theory is that the game was brought to England by French sailors or fishermen. In his book, Finn writes, "Anciently, Shut the Box stemmed from France, where dice playing preceded England by a number of years. Possibly in the hostile atmosphere of 18th century sea traffic, it was the Channel Islanders who provided the link which transferred the game between the rival longshoremen. Or perhaps, like dominoes, Shut the Box came to England in the first instance from French prisoners of war." The Channel Islands are mentioned many times in histories of Shut the Box, either as the go-between port that connected France to England, or in some accounts as the birthplace of the game itself. Finn goes on to write, "The modern revival, however, has been firmly English, with its center at the King's Arms at Christchurch near Bournemouth, from where the game has spread steadily outward since its reintroduction by the local enthusiast Mr. Chalky Trowbridge in 1958. Now, when studying ancient games, or even very old games like Shut the Box, there's never a credited author. I mean, no one knows who invented Nineman's Morris or Senate. So I was intrigued when I kept seeing this guy's name, Chalky Trowbridge, pop up in the literature. And not only his name, but the country, county, and specific pub where the game was allegedly reintroduced to England. Needless to say, I needed to know more about Chalky. The internet wasn't helpful. All references returned me to Pub Games of England. As far as I can tell, Timothy Finn's book is the original and only source of Chalky Trowbridge. Finn says his data came from conversations he had during research, which leads me to believe that Chalky may be apocryphal. But I wasn't quite ready to give up. The Channel Islands are comprised of several small islands, the two largest being the Bailiwick of Jersey and the Bailiwick of Guernsey. I found a historical society on each island and sent them an email. It took about a week for each to get back to me, and when they did, they had no information to share. No one had heard of Shut the Box or Chalky Trowbridge. Undaunted, I then emailed the Christchurch Historical Society and the King's Arms, the pub that Chalky was supposed to frequent. It's now a rather fancy-looking hotel and destination on the internet. Their website had no mention of Chalky or Shut the Box. And, sadly, I never heard back from either. I'm going to follow up a couple more times just to see if persistence will pay off, but until I get any response, I guess the true story of Chalky Trowbridge is lost to history. Hey, quick update. I was just making the final edits to this video to upload it tonight when I got this email from the Christchurch Historical Society. It reads, "Hi Craig, a very different inquiry from usual. We've asked on our Society Facebook page for any information on the game and Chalky's involvement, so this may take a little time. The King's Arms has just had new owners, so they may not know of any past stories, but will inquire. We may have found Chalky's address, and if so, his initials were CW, so possibly Charles William, but we'll spend more time on researching before we can confirm this. We'll keep in touch. Regards." So I couldn't be more excited about this. I really thought it was just a shot in the dark to email these people if they would even respond to my email, let alone dig into it and try to find some answers for me. I couldn't be more excited about this. So I'll definitely keep you guys updated on what I find out. Now, I'm not terribly surprised that I couldn't find a lot of recorded history on Shut the Box. It's a super simple, play with a beer in your hand pub game. No one is writing an exhaustive treatise on the strategies and philosophy surrounding Shut the Box. The game did have a resurgence of sorts in the 1950s and 60s. Canada Dry sent out promotional Shut the Box sets to pubs in the UK in the 60s under the name It's Your Round, with the tagline, "Beat your partner's score and he buys." Coincidentally, there are 9 letters in Canada Dry, making it easy to print their name on the shutters. When a number was shut, the shutter would reveal a suggested mixer, including ginger ale, of course, tonic water, cola, lime juice, tomato juice, and low calorie. The game is also marked with "Not to be played for gain," presumably for legal reasons. In 1972, the Pacific Game Company published a version that was specifically played for gain and called it Canoga. The game came with chips to gamble with and specific rules around how payouts worked. The rules begin, "Canoga is a game of skill and entertainment which may be played by 2 or more. Its origin dates back many years and it has been especially popular in Europe and the Orient." This is the only source I've seen that mentions the game being played in Asia. None of my research supports that. There are a few references in other sources that claim the game is played competitively in Central Africa, specifically Zambia. But the only evidence of that I can find is a photo from Games of the World and a photo from the Boardgame book, both apparently of the same artifact. It's listed as being from the private collection of R.C. Bell. The caption indicates that this is a carved box from Brotsaland, a region in Zambia. There's no other information about the photo, but if I understand what I'm looking at, there seems to be 2 sliding shutters in each row, which could reveal a total of 9 spots. But they aren't numbered, and I don't get how you would shut all 9 numbers at once. So I'm a little dubious that this is actually Shut the Box, at least as I understand the game. Now, if you want your own, there are Shut the Box sets available all over the internet, including 2- and 4-player sets, as well as this crazy-looking 6-player version. It doesn't surprise me that some sources claim that Shut the Box dates back to the 1800s or even earlier. And for the record, here's where I shift from what I know to what I think. Shut the Box is a cool little self-contained game in this form, but if you deconstruct it, that is, look at the component parts and not the whole, Shut the Box is really just a stakes board game. These sorts of games typically have a board that is used to hold the player's wagers, thus the name stakes board, that's separate from the action of the game. One of the best studied stakes boards games is the German game Gluckshaus. In that game, money is put in and taken out of numbered squares on a stakes board, but other than being a place to hold coins, the board has no function in the game. The real action happens with the dice. Cribbage is also a sort of stakes boards game. You race your pegs around the board, but the action is with the cards, not the board. Shut the Box is like this. While it's fun to slide doors or flip paddles, the numbers are there only to keep score. The real game happens with the dice. We know that Gluckshaus dates back to at least the 17th century because we have extant boards that prove this. And throwing dice or lots for gambling dates back to at least the Bronze Age and probably even earlier. It's not hard to imagine that as dice games evolved from simple rules like high throw takes the pot to more complicated games, that stakes boards were used to keep the gamblers honest. All of this means that I find it likely that a game like Shut the Box, where you're just rolling dice to eliminate numbers, existed well before it became popular as a pub game, even if it wasn't called Shut the Box then. If you want to learn more about stakes boards games, specifically Gluckshaus, I have a video that dives into Gluckshaus and similar Lucky 7 type games. The first version of the rules doesn't really have any strategy other than close the highest numbers first. And honestly, there's not much more strategy in the second version of the rules either. But being able to choose numbers in any combination that adds up to your total does lend itself to some light strategy. Personally, I try to keep the 1 and 2 open if I can, because I think it makes it slightly easier to make the numbers work in your favor. In either set of the rules, always drop down to throwing a single die as soon as you're able. Also, keep in mind the victory conditions if you're playing one of the special variations. Digital in particular requires you to pay attention to the final left to right number on the board, not the sum of the unclosed numbers. And that's Shut the Box. Honestly, out of all the games I've researched and built, I play this one more than any other. Now, that's because you can play solitaire, and I often play a round or two whenever I walk past it sitting on the counter. If you want to build your own Shut the Box box, I have a video that shows how I built this one. If you're still watching, I hope you'll like and subscribe. I'd super appreciate it. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Gaming Bench. That's a roll of 5. Close the 5. 7. Close the 7. 6. Close the 6. 4. Close the 4. Ooh, 9. That's good. 2. 3. And 1. Wow. That is how you shut the box.